So whose information has to go on the FAFSA? Well, there's a couple different sections. Number one is the student. The student will always have to provide information of their income, their assets, and personal information for the FAFSA. If the student is married, the student's spouse will have to provide information. If the student is a dependent, then the student's parents will have to provide information. That is basically who is going to have to create an FSA ID and provide income and assets on the FAFSA. So a question I get asked a lot is, do parents have to provide their financial information on the FAFSA? And it's basically a list of questions that will determine if you do or you do not. So the student who is applying, was the student born after 2001? Is the student currently not married? So are they single, divorced, widowed, separated? Is the student an undergrad, meaning first year, second year, junior, or beyond, but has not yet received an undergrad degree? And if the student answers no to all of the special circumstances. So if you answer no to all the special circumstance questions, born after 2001, you are working towards an undergrad degree and you're not married, your parent information is required. So parents, you have to give your information. Another question I get asked is, how many parents have to provide information? And when I say provide information, it means you have to create an FSA ID and you need to sign the FAFSA and disclose your income and your assets. So you have to ask yourself a couple questions to determine this. The first question is, the student who is applying, are the student's biological or adopted parents married? If the answer is yes, then you have to ask the next question of, did the parents file their taxes jointly? So if the biological or adoptive parents are married and they filed jointly, only one of the parents will have to create an FSA ID, but both parents' income and assets will be included for the FAFSA. Now, if your parents are married, but they did not file together, they filed separately, then both parents will need to create an FSA ID and submit their information. Now, if your biological parents are not married, the next question is, do your parents live together? And if the answer is yes, then both parents need to provide their information, and both parents will need to create an FSA ID. Now, if your biological parents are not married and they don't live together, the next question that needs to be asked is, did one of the parents provide more financial support than the other in the past 12 months? If the answer is yes, the parent who provided more financial support is the parent that needs to create an FSA ID, and their income and assets will be used on the FAFSA. Now, if your biological or adoptive parents are not married and they are not living together, the next question is, did one of the parents provide more financial support to the student in the past 12 months? If the answer is yes, the parent that provided more financial support has to create an FSA ID and their income and assets will be used on the FAFSA. If you cannot determine that one of the parents provided more financial support, then it is the parent that has the higher income and assets that will be the parent that needs to provide information. Now, in this scenario where the parents are not married, they don't live together, and whether you have a parent that provided more financial support or not, Once you know those two parents, the next question is, did that parent remarry? If the answer is yes, the new spouse has to also create an FSA ID and their information will also be used. If that parent did not provide, or if the parent who provide more financial support did not remarry, then it's just their information that will be needed. This is regardless if you actually live with your parents. Again, there are only select scenarios where parent information will not be required. So question number 1, student identity information. If you have an FSA ID, this should be pre-filled out, but ensure that this information is correct. So it's your first name, middle name, last name, suffix if you have one, junior, the third. You want to write down this in full and you want it to be exact as it states on your social security card. So you're not using any nicknames. You're also going to input your date of birth and your social security number. If you don't have a social security number, you can also input your tax identification number here. Make sure, again, not using your nicknames. And number 2, make sure that you're using this name on your college applications. So the social security number, the full name can match up from the financial aid form to your college application. Question number 2 is student contact information. So you want to ensure that you have a cell phone number, email address, and permanent address. All correct, all accurate, and make sure that your communication preferences are updated. That's how you answer question number 2. Question number 3, pretty straightforward. What is the student marital status? Is the student single, meaning they were never married? Are they married and not separated? Are they divorced, separated, or widowed? Pretty straightforward, but that's how you answer question number 3. Question number 4, what is the student's college or career plans? This is asking that in the school year that starts July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, what is the school year that the student will be in, right? What are they entering? So is it first year, meaning never attended college? Is it second year as a sophomore? Or is it other undergrad, meaning is it junior year or beyond? Then it asks, are you working towards a postgraduate degree, like a master's, a doctorate? Okay. And then there'll be one last question that says, at the time in the school year, will you have, as the school year starts, will you have already received your first bachelor's degree? And it's a yes or no question. So answer that correctly. But again, realize it's for the 2025-2026 school year. So if you're a high school senior, you are answering this as first year. Okay. You're a first year undergrad, never attended college. Okay. Freshman. Even if you have AP courses from high school, you still are stating that you were a first year student. Question number 5 is personal student circumstances. So there is a list of scenarios that you want to read thoroughly. If any of them apply to you, the student, make sure that you click them off. If none of them apply, click the none apply. That's how you answer question number 5. Question number 6 is about student homelessness. So is the student homeless, or are they basically self-sufficient and at risk of being homeless? You'll answer yes or no to this question. If you answered yes to this question, you will then be asked if someone had the authority to designate you as homeless. So read those through if that's your situation so that it can be cross-referenced. So make sure if you answer yes, you then select the proper authority who designated you as homeless or potentially being homeless. That's how you answer question number 6. Question number 7 is about student unusual circumstances, and it's asking, does the student have unusual circumstances that prevent them from getting parent information for the form? So read the options carefully, but it's basically if there's a potential threat, abuse, human trafficking going on in your world, answer yes to this question Again, for most of us, the answer will be no. But if you have these special circumstances, make sure that you are answering yes to this question, question number 7. So, question number 8 can be a little confusing. It's basically asking, are you applying for an unsubsidized direct loan only? The only reason you would answer yes to this question is if your parents are refusing to provide their information for the FAFSA. Now, in almost all cases, you want to make sure that the answer to this question is no, because you want to apply for all types of financial aid. If you do choose yes for this question, you cannot receive all aid, and the financial aid officer at the school will determine if you are eligible for an unsubsidized government loan, and that is all. So again, read this question carefully, because if you only are applying for this and you answer this question yes, you are limiting the amount of aid you could potentially receive. And you only answer yes to this question is if your parents are refusing to provide their information. Question number 9 is about the student's family size. So this really only applies to students who are independent. So the family size is the student. If the student's married, right, it would be 2 and all dependent children. If you import your taxes, this will be automatically answered. Okay. But then you also have the option of adding any additional dependents. So if you are potentially divorced and you have a child that wasn't a dependent on your tax return, you can add them here. And if you also are caring for someone else, that you will provide financial support for them from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, and they're not on your tax return, you can also add them as a dependent here. That's how you'll answer question number 9. For question number 10, based off of the family size from question number 9, how many members of the family will be attending college from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026? So again, this is for a student that's independent. How many members of the family, including yourself? So it's always 1 at least. But if there's other members of the family, if your spouse or you have children, or that other dependent you're caring for are also going to be attending college, again, from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, add them to your number 1, that is you. That's how you answer question number 10. Question number 11 is student demographics. So this is asking the student's gender, whether it's male, female, non-binary, or prefer not to answer. If the student is transgender, you would select the gender that you identify as at the time of completing this form. That's how you answer question number 11. Question number 12 is the student's race and ethnicity. Look at the options. Select the one that applies to you, the student. That's how you answer question number 12. Question number 13 is student citizenship. So are they a United States citizen? Are they an eligible non-citizen? Or are they neither a eligible or United States citizen? That's how you answer question number 13. Question number 14 is your state of legal residence. So input the 2-state abbreviation code and when you became a legal resident of that state. If you've been in the same state your whole life, enter your birth date. And that's important because there are some state grants that are only offered to those that have been in the state for a certain period of time. So make sure that you're answering that question correctly. And if you have lived there the whole state, again, just put the date of your birth in for that answer. That is how you answer question number 14. Question number 15 is about your parent education. So basically the options that you would select here are neither parent attended college, one or both parents attended college but neither complete it, or one of my parents completed college. And the last option is I don't know. So select the appropriate response, and that's how you answer question number 15. Question number 16 is if you have a parent that was killed in the line of duty after September 11th, 2001. So whether it was active military or as a public service officer. If the answer is yes, you answer yes. If the answer is no, You answer no. That's how you answer question number 16. Question number 17 asks for student high school information. So you can search by state, city, and then find your school. And did you receive a high school diploma or were you homeschooled? Did you end up receiving an equivalency? And if so, you would have to list what type of equivalency you received. That's how you answer question number 17. Question number 18 is asking about federal benefits that were received. So if the student or a member of the student's family received any federal benefits, there'll be a list of potential federal benefits. Read them carefully. If you are a recipient of any of those in 2023 or 2024, select those. This will not decrease the amount of aid you receive. It will actually help you maximize. So you're not lying here, but make sure to read all through every line that if you did receive some type of government benefits or if someone in your family received, you also want to make sure that you select the appropriate box. And that's how you answer this question. Question number 18. So this is actually a combination of questions 19, 20, and 21, but you want to give consent and approval for the FAFSA to import your taxes from 2023. If you want to qualify for potentially federal benefits, you have to do this. So this will take care of all of the tax questions that you may have to answer, but that's how you're answering the tax question. You're just giving approval and signing to give consent for them to import your tax information from 2023. So the next question is, after your taxes have been imported, you've given that consent, they've been imported, there will be a couple tax questions that you have to look at your tax return for, and it's the student tax return, remember, for this portion. The student tax return, it's asking, was there any IRA rollover? Was there any pension rollover? Or was there any scholarships that were received? And again, these are scholarships that would be on the tax return. So if a school gives you a scholarship, you're not listing these in this section. It's only taxable scholarships, which typically are going to be coming from private sources, not from the schools themselves. Question number 21 is the annual amount of child support that the student received. So again, this is an adult student. And if you received any child support, you're going to list the total amount. If you are married or remarried and your spouse received child support, you want to add the total amount that you and your spouse received in child support in the year 2023. If you did not receive any child support, answer is 0. So question number 22 is about student assets, and this is where things get a little complicated. So I'm going to do multiple posts on question number 22. The first piece you need to know is whose assets are included here. So in the first scenario, I'm going to say it's an independent student. You're not married. Okay, so you're an adult, you've received that bachelor's degree or anything else that has qualified you as independent for FAFSA purposes. You're only including the balances for these answers that are for you. The second scenario is you're that independent student, but you are married. So you have to include your balances and your spouse's balances. The third scenario there is you are a dependent student and your parents' information will also have to be included on the FAFSA. So for that, you're only including the actual student assets, not parent assets in this section. So follow me for my next few posts where I break down how you answer the cash, checking and savings, the net worth of investments, and the net worth of businesses. But come back to this if you need to figure out whose balances you have to add up to answer for these, and come back for question number 22, part 2. So question number 22, part 2. I've already gone through, check out part 1 if you didn't see that, on who is actually the student for this question of student assets. But right now I want to go through what is in the cash, savings, and checking accounts. So the first part of this question, very simple. What is the balance that you have in cash, checking, and savings? And the balance that you're going to use is what the balance is as of the day that you are submitting this form. Okay. So not a future value, not something, in the past. It's what the balances are at the date that you are filing. And it's only what you have in cash, savings, and checking. So for question number 22, part 3, I'm talking about the net worth of your investments. Now, again, it's the balance as of the date that you are filing, but not all investments have to be included into what you're going to add up. So what you need to include is the equity that you have in real estate, but only real estate that is a vacation home or a rental property. Now, you would take the value of the home, you would subtract any debts against that home, and you're left with the equity. So if it's a $100,000 home and a $50,000 mortgage is on that property, you only have to count $50,000 of equity, and that's for any vacation home or rental property. Now, you also have to add up the balances of other investments like trust funds, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, stock options, bonds, other securities or commodities, and any land contracts that you have. You also have to include here, as we're talking student assets, you have to include any education savings accounts that you, the student, own or your wife owns, but you, the student, are the beneficiary of. Those are the investments that you have to include. And again, it's the balance of those investments at the day that you file this FAFSA form. Now, those are the investments you include. There are investments you do not include, and that can make things very, very wrong for you in the future if you include these. So do not include, number 1, the equity in your primary home. Do not include the equity of your primary residence. Do not include retirement accounts. So your 401k, your IRA, your 403b, your pension, your annuities. Do not include Roth IRA balances. All of those balances you do not have to include when you're adding up the net worth of your investments. You also do not have to include the value or cash value of your life insurance policies. You do not have to include the value of ABLE accounts. You don't have to include the balance that you've already disclosed that's in cash, checking, and savings. Don't count that twice. You also don't have to include any accounts that you are the custodian of. So if you have an account that is an UTMA or UGMA account for your children, you're the custodian, not the owner. Don't add them here. And lastly, you do not have to include any education savings accounts like a 529 if you or your spouse are not the owner and you are the beneficiary. So if you have a 529 that your child is the beneficiary of, you do not have to include it. If your parents have a 529 that you are the beneficiary of, again, this is the student asset section. You do not have to include it in this section. So know what investments are added to this equation and which ones are not. Okay. So this is question number 22, but this gets into the student asset question. It's asking if the student owns a business, right? What is the net worth of the business? Now, how you want to answer this question, if this applies to you, make sure you check out the previous questions, by the way, for this on who we're talking about, who has to import or who has to provide this information. But if the student owns a business, you are not applying for a small business loan here. You're basically only disclosing what is a sellable asset, and it's owned by the business. Okay. So add up what the business assets, if you had to sell the business in 30 days, what are you getting? After that, subtract any debts that are held against the business, and that's the net worth. Now, if you're a partner in a business, after you do that formula, hey, we sell everything, we get $100,000 for it. The business has $50,000 worth of debt, so we're walking out with 50 grand. But I'm a 50-50 partner. I only would get 25,000 of that 50. You're only listing the 25,000 here. So don't overstate the value of your business. It's not the time to be proud here, But again, this is for student assets. So usually this question only applies to independent students. But know the formula and don't overstate the value of your business, or you're going to limit how much financial aid you get. And that wraps up question number 22, student assets. So question number 23 is, where do you send this information? In other words, what schools do you want the FAFSA to be sent to? Now, you can send the FAFSA up to 20 schools. If you are applying to more than 20 schools, then what you have to do is go through the entire process, submit the FAFSA, make sure that everything is in good standing. It has been processed. Once it's processed, you can log back in and change schools, meaning you can take some schools off the list and then resubmit with the new schools. That's anything above 20. If you're only applying to 10 schools at first and you're going to add 5 schools, there's no need to delete those schools. Now, a couple things with this. There are certain states that the order of the schools that will determine if you're eligible for state-based aid. Look into your state to see if there's a requirement on a school that has to be in the first spot to be eligible for state-based aid. Reach out to any financial aid office at your schools. Make sure that you're looking at any state websites, but know the rules for your state grants. And if a specific school or state school has to be listed on the top line to potentially apply and receive any state grant money. Also, if you are applying to more than 20 schools, with this, if you have to make a correction on the FAFSA, so say you process the FAFSA and then you change 5 schools, you're applying to 25. So you took 5 off, you put the new 5 on. If after that date you file a correction, the 5 schools that you took off will not get the updated submission. So you would have to put those back on to make sure that all your schools have the most up-to-date submission of the FAFSA. So question number 24, it wraps up the student section of this wonderful free application for federal student aid. It's the sign and submit. So basically, just make sure you read this through, understand what you're signing, and then basically you're going to sign and submit. And if a parent is needed, this is also where you can invite them to complete their portion of the FAFSA. So question number 25, if the student is married, their spouse has to create an FSA ID. And the first question is their information, full name, social security number, date of birth. All right. If you don't have a social security number, tax identification number as well. But if you have that FSA ID, it'll be imported. Make sure that the information is correct. Question number 26 is the student's spouse's contact information. So cell phone, email address, permanent address. Pretty straightforward. But again, question number 26 is if the student is married, this is their spouse's information. The next few questions, just like for the student, if the student is married, their spouse has to give consent to have your tax returns submitted. So you have to sign, give approval and consent to have the IRS basically import the information into the FAFSA. And that will take care of all, or the majority, pretty much all of the income questions that are needed for the student spouse. And again, if the student is married, you have already included all of the assets in your section if you're married from your spouse, because you have to include them both. So there is no asset section for the student's spouse because it was already included previously. Once the student's spouse has imported the taxes, we get to the next question, which is question number 29. And it's the student's spouse basically signing and submitting their portion, their section of the FAFSA. That's question number 29. So now we're about to get into the parent information. So again, watch one of my very early FAFSA videos that I'm going through in this series to see which parent information is needed. I really walk through the whole scenario of when it's needed. But for all these future videos that I'm about to go through, it is specifically talking about the parent who is required to provide information that needs to create that FSA ID. We're talking about them from here on out. Well, for the next few questions. So question number 30, parent identification. Again, you have to create an FSA ID. This information should be automatically imported, but it's your full name, your date of birth, your social security number, tax identification number. If you don't have a social security number, make sure that it is exactly as it appears on your social security card. And that's how you answer question number 30 for parent identification. Question number 31 is parent contact information. So this is the parent, your cell phone, permanent address, email address. And that's it. That's how you answer question number 31. Question number 32 is the parent's marital status. So is the parent single, meaning they were never married? Is the parent unmarried, but both legal parents are living together? Are the parents married, but not separated? Is the parent remarried? Is the parent separated? Is the parent divorced, or is the parent widowed? Select the one that applies to you and you're ready to move on. But that's how you answer question number 32. Question number 33 is the parent's state of legal residence. You are going to put in the state and when did you become a legal resident of that state. So if the parent was born in that state and has never left when they became a legal resident, is their birth date. That's what you're putting in for that question for question number 33. So question number 34 is about family size. So here you're going to be asked the question, is the family size or the number of dependents that you have different than what was on your tax return? So if you're divorced or separated, or you're married and you're filing separately, you may not have a dependent that's one of your kids on the tax return. So here, if the answer is yes, it means that you have other dependents. And this is where you would list other dependents as well. So it's going to automatically pull dependents from the tax return. Here is where you would list any additional dependents so that the FAFSA has your full family size. So question number 35 is, of the parent's family, right? How many students will you have that will be attending college? How many family members are attending college from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, but do not include parents. So if you're a parent and you're going back to school, your spouse is going back to school, you don't include that. You only include dependents that are attending college at this time. Question number 36 is any federal benefits received. So you want to answer this question. If anyone in the family received any federal benefits, you look down the list and select any that anyone in the family received. And that's basically how you answer question number 36. Again, don't think that this will exclude you from aid. It'll actually increase your chances of aid. So we're answering this truthfully, but at the same time, make sure you're not skipping over this or saying, hey, this is only going to hurt. It's not going to hurt, right? Answer it truthfully. And if none of these apply to you, select none of these apply, and then you move on. But that's question number 36. So question number 37 and 38 can basically be summed up because you're going to give consent for the FAFSA to import IRS information. So you're going to give signature for approval and consent for that to be done so that your student can receive the maximum amount of aid possible. But it's also going to cut down on the questions that you would have to answer from your tax return. So a portion of question 38, but after your taxes have been imported, you will then be asked a couple questions about if you did an IRA rollover and what amount. So if you did a direct rollover from a IRA, a 401k to an IRA, list the amount here. Same thing if you did a pension rollover from a pension to an IRA, list the amount here as well. It'll also be asking if the parent received any earned income credit. So you answer yes, no, or I don't know. Again, that's something that you would see on the 1040 tax return. Another question here is the amount that the parent would have received in college grants, scholarships, or other benefits that were basically reported as income. So again, not a scholarship from a school, but these are grants and scholarships that were taxable. So they will be on your tax return, but you have to list those as well. And lastly, did you have any foreign income exclusion? So for all of these, you're putting the amounts in if any of these apply to you. Make sure that you do not miss this, because if you don't, basically when the taxes are imported, numbers might not line up exactly the way that you want them to. So make sure that you answer these questions as well. So question number 39 is asking about annual child support that was received. If you receive child support, you're adding that amount and putting it into this answer. If you receive no child support, the answer is 0. But if you answered earlier that you were married, you're remarried, or you're unmarried, but you're living with legal parent, then if your spouse received child support from someone else, right, you have to list the amount that they also included. So if you're both receiving child support, add it together. If you got nothing, you don't just put 0 if your spouse also received child support. So you want to put that answer in here. And again, that's if you receive child support from someone else, a previous spouse. So question 40 is probably where most mistakes happen. So I'm going to break this one down into a couple parts. Number one, we'll do part 1 now. So parents, if you are single, if you are divorced, but basically if you are the only person that has to be a contributor on your child's FAFSA, then you're only including the balances that you own for these different answers. Now, if you are married, remarried, or unmarried but living with the legal parent, then you have to combine all of the assets that you have with your spouse, with your current spouse, not your former spouse, or the other biological parent that you are living with. You're going to add all these together. So question number 40, part 2 is going through number 1. Part 1 basically said, well, which parents do I have to add together here, right? So go back to part 1 if you didn't see it. Part 2 is saying, okay, I'm going to add up the total for the first part of this question is the total amount of cash, checking, and savings. All accounts, all parents that need to be added together. That's the answer you're putting in, and it's the balance as of the day that you are submitting the FAFSA. That is the answer to this question. So question number 40, part 3, is the net value of your investments. Again, you're putting the value of the investments at the date that you are completing this form. So investments include real estate. So not the house you live in. We'll get to that next video. But vacation homes, rental properties, any property that you personally own, you have to list, but you will subtract any debts against that property. So if you have a mortgage against the property, you subtract the mortgage balance from the value of the property. That is the number you're adding from a real estate perspective. Investments also include money market accounts, CDs, stocks, stock options, bonds, any other securities, land contracts. All of that has to be added together for the net worth of your investments. Now, when it comes to education accounts, like a 529, if your child owns a 529 that is known as an UTMA 529 account, you don't list it in that student section, you list it here under the parent. Now, you as the parent, if you own a 529, you only have to list the balance of the 529 that the student who's filling out the financial aid form, the FAFSA, is the beneficiary of. You do not have to include the balance of 529s that other children are beneficiaries of. So again, to recap, investments, some you have to include, some you do not. The ones you have to include are your equity in real estate, but only vacation homes or rental properties that are personally owned for this section, not ones that are in a business, okay? Stocks, stock options, bonds, mutual funds, brokerage accounts, securities, commodities, anything that is in an investment that is not in a retirement account, basically, is what has to be included here. When it comes to education accounts, the only ones you're including are A, if your child owns a 529 that would be known as an UTMA 529, you have to include that in the parent portion and only include 529 accounts that you, the parent, are the owner and the beneficiary is the student who is completing the FAFSA. That is all that you have to include for your investments. Now I want to talk about the investment question about net worth of investments. Some investments you do not have to include. So do not include the equity of your primary residence, right? The house that you live in, you do not have to disclose the equity in that primary residence. You do not have to include any retirement account balances. Now, not ones that you have earmarked for retirement that might be in a mutual fund, actual qualified retirement accounts, meaning your 401k, your IRA, your pension, your 403b, your Roth IRA, annuities. You do not have to include those for the net worth of your investments. They are excluded. You also do not have to include the cash value of life insurance policies. You don't have to include the balance of ABLE accounts. If you have restricted stock that is not yet vested, you do not have to include those as well. Other money you don't have to include are things you've already disclosed, like your cash, checking, and savings. Don't add that twice. And if you are a custodian on an account, you do not have to list any accounts that are actually owned by your children, right? You're just a custodian, right? And if you're a student who's filling out the financial aid form, that would have already been listed in the student section. Again, 529 plans, if you were the owner of a 529 and the beneficiary is not the student who is attending college, right? We're not filling out the FAFSA for them. You do not have to include the balance of those 529s. Also, you do not have to include the balance of any 529s that you do not own. So if there's grandparents, aunts, or uncles who own a 529, they do not have to be added to this question. So watch my last video for ones that have to be included. These are all the things that you do not have to include, and do not include them because it's only going to make the colleges think you can afford more for college. Now it's the net worth of your business or family farm. So there is no longer a small business exclusion. If you're a business owner, you got to answer this question. Now, as a business owner, you're not applying for a small business loan. Okay. Not the time to be proud and say your business is worth $1 million. What you are listing here is the assets of the business, meaning what can be sold. And if you had to sell the business in 30 days, what are you getting for it? Okay. Take that number, and if you have any debts that the business owns, you are going to then subtract the debts from what the sale price of the business would be. That is what you are including for the net value of the business. And also, if you're a partner, right, whatever the actual value would be, whatever percentage you own of the company, well, it's only a percentage of that actual number after you take sale price, debts, whatever's left, add your percentage of ownership to that, and that's how you'll be left with this answer, and that'll wrap up the parent asset question for number 40. So now we're at question 41, and the parent is now going to sign, approve, give consent, and submit the form. Now, if you are in the situation where an additional parent is needed, this is where you can input information for the other parent that needs to create an FSA ID, and the additional parent information is needed. So here you can invite that contributor to complete their portion of the FAFSA. So if that second parent needs an FSA ID and needs to give authorization, basically they will log in. And once they log in, they will do the parent identification, the parent communication settings, make sure that that is all correct. After that, you're giving the approval and the consent to have the taxes imported. And once you've done that, then all of the asset information has already been disclosed. So you don't need to answer all of the asset questions again. Now you're just ready to sign and submit. And that wraps up every single question on the FAFSA.